Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 275 of Dial the Gate, the Stargate Oral History Project. My name is David Reed. I really appreciate you being here for this one, and I'm happy and privileged to welcome back Tor Valenza, writer and senior story editor for Stargate SG-1. Sir, welcome back to the show. Thank you for coming back around. How you doing?
Again for having me on, and I hope everybody can forgive my bad memories, but I'm going to do my best to.
Well, we totally understand. It's been a while since the show has aired, but there's just I'm continually surprised that people continue to. And surprised probably is not the right word. I shouldn't be surprised, but I'm gratified to continue to see that its audience continues to
Yeah,
grow after all this time. Certainly not everyone sticks around, but others,
thanks to you guys,
yeah.
and definitely these conversations help, and I'll bet you'll have questions that actually make me reach back and try to give you the right answers about things. I did find something in an old journal, some of the stuff
Really?
that yeah, from last time about Urgo, which was interesting. Some of the files were corrupt, so I wasn't going to get
Right.
that. But Urgo, the name,
Yes.
was originally so, as a story editor, senior story editor, whatever, they just hire you as a pitching machine. Like they want you to throw things up against the wall and see what sticks.
Okay.
And one of the things that I came up with that where Urgo, so I borrowed Urgo from this earlier pitch for the Dom DeLuise version of Urgo, but was where SG-1, and I could see Dom DeLuise sort of playing this, but they go to a town and they're looking, it's kind of a barter town. It's like super commercy, and there's this kind of hacker kind of guy, not hacker but hawker, I should say,
Okay.
um who has some kind of ghoul technology that Teal'c says this is good stuff, like we could learn from this, you should buy this. And of course it's a lot of haggling, and finally Sam goes in there and says, okay, what do you want for this? And he looks at her and she
Uh-oh.
said, and he says, I want your fray or something like that. It was some kind of weird. And she goes, and Teal goes, I don't know what a fray is. And he says, oh, you won't miss it. It's fine. And it's just such valuable technology that, um, they come to a deal, they get it, they bring it back to the thing, but now they have to give the fray, and they think that it's some kind of other weapon that they have, or something like that. And it's Sam's fertility, because
Oh.
his wife. And so there's this moral dilemma of, a bargain is a bargain. And, you've done this. And so somehow there's some kind of technology that's going to transfer, again, her eggs to his wife's eggs. And this makes sense for me because at the time, my wife and I were going through in vitro fertilization. So it
Hmm.
was kind of like that kind of thing. So anyway, they thought that doesn't work. But I like the name Urgo for this bargainer guy, and I kind of seemed like it could have been Dom DeLuise in a more evil kind of manner.
Dom could have played
Not
that part as well.
yeah. Anyway, but so a little bit of Urgo history, at least in the name, and then the other iteration came up
Whose idea was
later.
it to get Dom into the show? Was that your thought?
No, I mean, Peter DeLuise, again, of
Yeah.
course, was always, part of the show, and had always been saying, yeah, I've asked my dad, and he said he'd be up for it for the right story.
Yeah.
And the next, iteration that I came up with him being this, like, that then it became the imaginary friend episode. Um, and he sparked to that. you know, and
Wow.
so,
Wow.
and I was like, I was told that I was going like, really? He wants to do mine? And that was like really exciting for me. And I don't know if I still have it, but anyway, he signed one of his cookbooks for
Ah!
me, and that was
Ah!
very nice. Uh,
Absolutely. Where was the original? So the was the original nugget for Urgo nugget? Pardon the pun, the little thing in his head. The imaginary friend idea, or did it come from tagging animals in the wild? Where did this kind of swim in?
um, it originally was, yeah, again, when I'm looking back at my journals about all this stuff, it definitely was just shooting things against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have to you have to imagine that when I'm in this space, it's just like free writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just things just 10 ideas come up in one paragraph. And yeah, the what is in this journal that I found um was the teaser alone. So the teaser being, which pretty much stayed in place. They see this beautiful planet. They go like, okay, yeah, let's go there. And they immediately come out and they go like, what happened? And he says, you've been gone and everybody liked that idea. Now what? Like what happened in that space? And he says, well, they've got to be infected with something. I mean, that was obvious to all of us. And then the imaginary friend idea just sort of, came in. And I think I was less originally, I was trying to be more serious about it. It was like it was mind, it was more like mind control type of evil mind control. And I think Brad and Robert both said, no, this should be a comedic one. This could be for Dom. And so I said, oh, you
Ah.
want comedic? I can do comedic, at least my version of comedic. And I did. Yeah.
This is regularly up there with Window of Opportunity and one or two others in terms of um, what people consider to be the best of Stargate SG-1. I'm not going to speak for everybody. Not everyone likes the comedy edge, but I would say 90-95% of fans do, especially when you have a terrific actor, and
Yeah.
when you have a terrific actor that melds with the part, it's gold. Were you on set when Dom was on set? Did you get to go down and watch filming?
No, not that much.
Okay.
I did, he came up to the office a lot where I
Ah.
was, working on my next stuff. But, again, this is as a story editor and everything else, and I'm glad I wasn't because it would have hurt. I mean, in the sense that, well, again, so I think I mentioned this in our last session together, but you write your draft, and I think in terms of the plot, that was my draft. That
Mm-hmm.
was everything in my draft. Then the executive team kind of punches it up, and they put in their own jokes and things like that. But then, as I said, unfortunately, Dom couldn't memorize his lines.
So he's
So
riffing.
yeah, so he
Okay.
was kept improvising all these things often, and so all my jokes went. Now, he replaced them with his different kitschy and different kind of jokes, but I liked my jokes, and
Of
for the
course.
plot stuff, so I, that's not to say. I mean, I think I also mentioned this last time that, making a TV show or a film is just, or even a video game is just so collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
And the combination just comes together and a lot of times it works and a lot of times it doesn't work. In this case, it really worked for,
Yeah.
a lot of people. And some, like you said, probably, think that, oh, this was just, a sitcom or
Mm-hmm.
just vaudeville.
I can
And
go ahead.
yeah, I was just saying in some cases it is. But that's the process, and that's what you just have to. There's a famous line. I think it was Hemingway who said, it was either him or Fitzgerald who said, "You've got to be able to kill your darlings,"
Yep.
and sometimes you just have to do that. So when I saw the dailies of coming back and what it was going like, that's not our lines. And when I say our lines, I mean it was like what was on the script, what was on the final script, which everybody had approved and he had approved and everything else. But just that's just the way it was,
Yeah,
and
I see.
he just made it work, and which was great. I mean, he made it work in his own way. He made the plot, he did the lines enough to make the plot still what the plot was. So
I have had conversations with writers who have come on, and we're kind of dancing around what is ultimately, if I'm going to boil it down, yes, my name is on it, but a lot of the things you're talking about, I take credit for it on the screen, but I didn't come up with,
yeah,
because by the time it got to this point, it's a collaborative art. And then you have someone as incredible as Dom who comes in. There's certain things that you're just not going to be able to compete with. That
yeah.
he's there delivering, and it's like it's undeniably great, but it's not what was written. And I can understand that.
Well, and there's another level to that of, again, what's in your head. Like even with the regular cast, you expected them to say the line in a certain way, um,
Ah.
in your head. That's, you're hearing their voices in your head, and they deliver things. And again, they're actors. So they deliver them in very different ways. Sometimes, better, sometimes not
Mm-hmm.
as better in your head, but it is what it is. And that's their craft. And so they have to interpret it. And again, as a screenwriter, unless you're the director, you've got to let that go. When
Mm-hmm.
you're the writer director,
Mm-hmm.
then
Sure.
definitely, things are going to, you're going to have more influence that way. And when you're the writer, director, producer, even more so. So, but then again, a star is a star, and I would say that Richard Dean Anderson in my 2 years there were very collaborative. He was very collaborative, but when he said no, he meant no, and he was an
Yeah.
executive producer, so he could. Did
Yeah.
you interview him? Did you get
Rick.
him on?
Rick
Yeah,
is very selective about whom he communicates with. So I
yeah.
have met him and talked with him on multiple occasions, but I think, frankly, the granularity at which we go at this would scare him off. So
Yeah,
because he's much broader strokes. So he was there
yeah,
to have a good time, make some quality entertainment, and that was what it was. But that doesn't make him like a sci-fi fan per se. So I've got to respect
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite lines from the entire franchise is in this episode, and I've got to ask you: was this an ad lib or was this one of yours? When Doc Frazier asks, "What does he look like?" and Jack says, "A famous tenor." I mean, that is
Oh,
so funny.
yeah. No, that was not in my original,
Okay.
yeah, script. Yeah,
Jeez.
that was
Oh,
definitely something of, yeah, let's put Peter in there, and that'll be great.
jeez.
Yeah.
Any more memories from that particular episode? The creature design, the little guy, the frog under the glass.
So
There was some really cool visual effects in this one.
yeah, and in a way that came from, well, I don't know if that came from, I mean, and things meld together, but
Yeah.
I remember before I moved up to Vancouver, I was pitching Holiday, which was before called that the Imbroglio. And that's the body switching
Mm-hmm.
one, which we talked about before. And originally that was supposed to be um, uh, basically, um, you know, either Daniel or Teal'c or Rick switched into a frog. of some sort, and it being an animated frog, because they said don't think about budget, don't think about
Okay.
anything, just do that. And I thought, okay, well, what if it's an animated thing and it's a talking frog? Um, so I don't know if that little seed turned into that frog or not later. I just maybe
Yeah.
I just, yeah, at the time made it an alien, yeah,
Mhm.
creature, and that was it.
The
But
concept art for it is really cool and almost exactly what it was in the final product. When they really take a swing at it, they can one end can respond to the other end in terms of production. Yes, we can do exactly that, and there's a
yeah,
lot of carryover. I find that production rarely creates something that doesn't that goes to waste. There's uh, uh, the the episode, I think it was that oh gosh, for heaven's sake, my 41-year-old brain is starting to cause me trouble here. There's an episode with the spirits episode that Heather Ash did, and in the concept art, you got the gills, the creatures with the
actually, I
gills.
wrote spirits.
You wrote spirits. Then why am I doing that? Gosh, sorry, man. I apologize.
That's okay.
Gosh, you did write spirits. That's correct. I apologize. I was talking with Christina Cox, and I was like, I knew I spoke with a woman about this, so I apologize to her. The creature with the gills, that was actually from a previous episode that was done called The Gamekeeper, and they did
Mm,
the prosthetics for your episode, so they carried that over. So a lot of that
yeah,
happened.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm amazed at what they, created from scratch, and I think I showed you that I have. They gave me the design for the totem pole,
Yes, exactly
and
right.
framed it,
My
and then I have
apologies. That's such a flub. Jeez, man.
and you call yourself a fan.
I
No,
know. I'm beginning to lose it. Point
there's
of
only there's only 10 seasons worth of episodes, so
Yeah, and
don't.
350 franchise episodes. So,
Right.
point of view. We had already done. It's kind of Stargate's version of a mirror universe episode, but in this case, we have an actual mirror called a quantum mirror. So we've done some alternate dimension, alternate reality stories before. This thing was brought back for the quantum mirror for this episode in point of view. What can you tell me about this original idea? In this case, we're not going to another place. Someone else is coming to us, and that's kind of an interesting twist.
Yeah. What I can tell you about that, again, this very brief
Mm-hmm.
memory, um, is that we had a hole. We had a big gaping hole because of some script either died from a freelancer, um, or whatever.
Mm.
Maybe the MGM didn't like it. Whatever it was something that had to be completely rewritten, and we just decided, okay, we've got to come up with something from scratch and write something in like 48 hours. And
Wow.
so everybody was like brought in um, to just hammer out the plot of it. And so that's why I got story credit, was because I was part of that brainstorming session. But the whole staff was there trying to work it out. And I can't remember what my contribution was, honestly.
Okay.
But it was very generous for them to say, okay, story by, and they put all the current writers in there, and then Brad and I think it was Brad and Robert, or no, Brad
Brad and
and
Jonathan
Brad and Jonathan just
and
did what
Robert.
they did Robert get
Yeah, he did.
writing credit?
Jonathan, Brad, and Robert. I just went and checked. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
So wow.
So they just hammered it out, and they took different acts and melded it all together, and then the magic happened. So
The
yeah,
amount of labor that goes into creating just one story in some cases. I've had Joseph Malazzi on where they were like, we would have sessions and sessions trying to crack this, one idea. and we're not getting it. And then all of a sudden, boom, something happens where it's like, now we've got it. And you're just spinning and spinning and spinning. And
Yeah.
in some cases, rather traumatizing, trying to find an in that's going to make an idea work. And until you get it, you're just kind of in free fall, waiting for the right grasp of a ledge to come out so that you can cling to this story and start pulling yourself up. It's a lot of
Yeah.
work.
Well, it's even more pressure when you actually have to start something the following week for everybody. I mean, in other words, like the staff. So that's why I believe we made it mostly a bottle episode, meaning that it was going to be mainly on the
Yeah.
Stargate sets. Um, and because, again, okay, well, now we don't have to worry about locations and we can just do it, right here. And, that I just remember it was a really high pressure situation for us to come up with this script story because nobody starts without the script.
That's
And we
right.
didn't have, we had zero and it had to start production in like 2 weeks or something like that.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Under
And
what
so that happened.
circumstance? I guess just, things fall out with another idea. It just doesn't work anymore. They have to
Like I
throw it in
said,
the bin.
we may have been, I don't remember the exact
Yeah.
circumstance. All I remember is that suddenly there was a hole. Like the script that we
Wow.
thought was going to be there
Wasn't
could not
anymore.
be there anymore, and
Wow.
we just had to start from scratch. Or does somebody have anything that's ready to go? And then, and nobody did. So
Yeah.
we all got together.
I think that it's so extraordinary how so many of these episodes that are done um, for legitimate cost saving purposes become such remembered shows. Like, okay, we've got this story
Mhm.
that's got to happen in the next couple of weeks here. We can't go off site for this. We have to shoot it in the studio. And Point of View is just one of those that's remembered as one of the higher caliber in my opinion, in any fan's estimation. And to hear that, yeah, we were kind of flying by the seat of our pants for this one for a little bit until we dialed it in. It was a last minute addition. You
Yeah.
wouldn't expect that, but yeah, that's what
Well,
production
I
works.
mean, but look at the elements of it. I mean, Sam and Rick, not
Kowalski and
Rick, but
yeah,
we're married in the alternate
yeah,
universe. I mean, so that's definitely going to be something that everybody's been, wanting and
that's true.
everything else. And so you have that drama to it. So it was a perfect way to create that soap opera tension of
Hmm.
it. And, especially with him being dead in the alternate universe, there's going to be the tension of, well, in our universe, so I'm, as both a writer and a fan, I'm glad that they never truly consummated, that, and they teased it all the way for as long as they could.
There's
Um,
an Air Force component to it because she's under his command.
yeah,
But also, as an audience member, there's like a certain desire for payoff at some point because I would think, as a writer, it would be okay. How long can we really sustain this without just making the audience bored silly? Well, nothing's going to
yeah,
happen. They as long as she's under his command, they can't. You know.
yeah.
So.
I mean, again, it's just one of those things where they pulled it off in an artistic, satisfying way enough. I
Mm.
mean, you got to have that frustration, and at the same time, yeah, people can't roll their eyes at it either. And so I mean, again, great acting as usual.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the situation of them not, breaking the
Mm-hmm.
regulations, it holds true, especially for Sam. But I think um, that there was also that idea of we want the Sam character, not we, but I think MGM
Mm,
and again Brad and Jonathan um, didn't want her to just turn into the love interest. You
no.
know, they wanted her to always just be a team member. And so if you had that dynamic that was permanent, and even if they got divorced or
Oh
whatever,
gosh.
you
Yeah.
know, it just would turn into another show.
Right.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
whatever was good for Jack should be good for Sam. Sam shouldn't be just one note. That's not why she's there. She's there for a host of reasons, none the least of which is exposition and skill.
yeah,
So
yeah. No, absolutely for all those reasons. But I think, that was a really strong choice on their part is because I think the conventional way would have been, yeah, that eventually that they get together and maybe they do it in an alternate universe, but
right,
not permanently, which is what
absolutely.
well.
Past and present. Linnea
Uh,
is one of my favorite villains from the entire franchise. And they had a great actress, Bonnie Bartlett, who came in season two to play her. We've had Bonnie on twice. To
well,
bring her back in a manner that was subversive as this audience member here, was very unexpected and kind of threw a curveball at it. What can you tell me about point of view of excuse me, past and present?
what I can tell you is that they wanted to bring back Linnea,
Mm,
for sure. They thought she was a great character, and um, and they wanted to do it. And so, you know, this was one of the scripts that was a big struggle for me,
okay.
honestly, to be honest. Um, and I did my three drafts of it, and then I think Brad took over and finished it. But it was really tough to get the right balance. I was very plotty about it in terms of and I liked the moral issue of, well, she's a different person now. Um, but
Mm,
what they wanted more of, and which I couldn't deliver um, in my drafts, was the love story
okay.
between
Kira and
Daniel,
Daniel.
yeah, and
Yeah.
Linnea. And because he had just was mourning over Charest, and
Yep.
they wanted that thing. And yeah, I just couldn't pull it off. It just for me it was just not working. The muses weren't talking, and so they definitely layered that in. But the beginning, middle, and end, structure of it is mine. But that all that part, and the back and forth, and then the end was completely my end was completely rewritten, and if I remember correctly. Again, because I couldn't solve that, and they had to solve it in a very in a way that was on the base and all
Mm.
these other things. So that's all I can tell you from that.
Can we explore the nugget of the idea a little bit here? Because I think what's fascinating about this episode is that it suggests or it asks the question, can the nature of a person truly change when they're kind of reset to a certain point in their mind? In this case, you have a memory wipe. And the question is the nature of Linnea, this um, destroyer of worlds, this
Yeah,
genocidal maniac, still in there. Uh,
right.
and
And she seemed to be helping and all, and that was, maybe my problem was that I was all too willing to accept that. In other words, I accepted the good
ah,
Linnea a lot more than um, the guys wanted me to
okay,
accept it. And so I think that debate was muted because, I was going like, she's a and that was the
That's it.
perspective of how I was making Daniel fall in love with her. Was again, she's a completely different person, and it may have gotten repetitive. I just remember yeah, I just remember having the meetings with the guys, and it's no, it's not there yet. I don't really believe he's in love with her, and I'm like, I, I said, well, I'm just trying, and
Sure.
yeah. So again, 24 years ago. So forgive me. I just remember being very frustrated by this one. And and that concept, yeah, of course, I think we all want to change. Interestingly, I mean, when I look back at some of the journals that survived here, a lot of the same issues that I was dealing with, in there personally in my writing life, I'm still dealing with today, I mean, I think there's still those things about procrastination and stuff like that. And, I
So many of us are guilty of that. That's for sure. Right here.
yeah, well, as a writer, you can't. I think
Yeah.
I'm I'm got my everybody can see my solar panel there.
Yeah.
So I've got my podcast, Probably True
Yeah.
Solar Stories, and I really should be writing every day to create new episodes. But I create seasons because I'd rather just write a bunch of things first and then record them. So it's just, but that means I have to write every freaking day
Yeah.
and consistently. And I think really that is the key to a lot of things in life is consistency. Like whether you feel like it or not, you just have to do it as a practice. And whether you succeed or fail, next day you got to do it again.
Stephen King always talks about, 2,000 words a day.
Yeah,
Like, and
yeah,
he has a certain time of the day where he just locks himself away. It's in the
yep,
morning for him, and he just hammers them out. And there are some people who have the discipline. He especially did when he was a smoker. He really could do it. And then he found that, when he lost that, or it wasn't so easy, but trying to strike that balance and get into the rhythm and just
yeah,
accepting the reality that, the muses, they're going to come, we can rewrite later.
yeah, yeah,
Some people have a method. So
yeah. Neil Gaiman, another
yes.
prolific writer, also says his method is that he sets a time
Mm.
and in a place, and he can do one of two things. He can do nothing, like literally just sit there and not type, or he can write. And he can't check email. He can't, you know, those are the only two things he's allowed to do between a certain time. And he says his mind just gets so bored doing nothing that he just, but that also is a little bit of a discipline in order
Yeah.
to not, reach your hand over and check your
Your
email, check your
phone.
phone or anything
Yeah.
else like that.
He's
So
putting
he
himself in
says,
prison. Yeah.
yeah,
So
it's sort of
you have two options.
you have two options. You can start, and he doesn't have a he apparently, I don't know if this is still true, but at least he writes everything handwritten in his first draft,
Ah.
and then
Yeah.
his second draft is transferring
Oh my
that
gosh.
to typewriter or whatever the
The
computer.
computer, which he does himself. Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
There's something to be said for the pace of handwriting. My hand gets sore very quickly.
yeah,
It's probably just lack of practice. But there is something to be said for that velocity, which, by the time that it reaches the pen or the pencil, a lot of the errors are straightened out in your mind in terms of untangling the threads as they move forward into the writing utensil. But yeah, I suppose there's a method for that, so that some people find preferable. That's
yeah,
wild.
yeah.
Divide and Conquer, one
Divide
of
and
the most
go ahead.
divisive shows,
Ah,
the most polarizing of its time, Gate World wrote at least one article about the fact that like 50% of fandom hated it and 50% of fandom loved it. It was the most polarizing show of the day.
Oh.
And I think it's brilliant to have an episode that will do that to a fandom, cleave it in two, because you're making people feel something. And that's praiseworthy. Tell me what you can about Divide and Conquer. I love this show.
So, well, thank you. This one, again, was one of those where I just wanted it to be, definitely kind of this mystery kind of thing. So it started out as there's a mole in SG-1. That was like the log line. Somebody is a spy.
I'll go a little spy.
Pardon me. A Goa'uld. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And with the intent of, not only giving information, but also eventually being a time bomb of some sort.
Wow.
So that was the nugget general thing. And my first drafts were very much in that, who's the spy, and we're narrowing it down. We do narrow it down and everything. And the Za'tarc technology, I think, came more from the guys. They said, we got to make this more technical. We've got to make this more, And so, that became more and more important. And then they added the political dynamic as well. For me, it was just purely who's the bad guy and why, and how did this happen? And then so that was the initial thing, and then they added the extra layer of let's go back to
Martouf.
Not Martouf, but the episode that it refers to.
Oh yes, so this was just from after upgrades.
Right.
Okay.
And they said, well, what if they had a missing memory, and that's what they're lying about? So for me, it was very one-dimensional in the beginning of they're not lying, and yet they're being called out as being the spies, and we can't tell why. And they added that extra dimension. I don't know, the executive staff. I can't say whether it was Brad or Robert.
So the romance dimension of it being subversive about their feelings came later.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that got added into it. And so, again, I think that's part of the brilliance and frustration and why people love and hate it, is because it's more of those things where you see those two in love and can't do anything about it. So
I can tell you a big part of the reason of the contention. They blew away Martouf. Martouf was a fan favorite. Was it your idea to bring him in? Did that come later? Was it your idea to knock him off? And that is a bold one. That is a.
I honestly can't remember that. I would say that that's probably their idea, because I would never kill off a character. As a lonely senior story editor, I could not kill off a character. So if they did that, then they had a reason. But people in Stargate come back all the time.
Certainly
in
true.
different ways, and so you never know if there's going to be a Martouf twin or whatever, which never happened. But
JR was scheduled to come back for season 5 in a 2-parter called Summit and Last Stand, and he was unable to due to scheduling, and so they brought in Courtney Stevens, who had recently been in the previous episode, and to kind of play the role of the host for Lantash, and Lantash the symbiote did survive. So
Right.
that's one of
Yeah.
those episodes where it's uh, you, there's something to be said for a show that breeds conversation in and of itself because the events are so electrifying, and to have this idea of what does an alien lie detector look like, and can it
Yeah.
have the same similar issues to ours? In this case, well, you can't necessarily rely on its output. In this case, this person is a Za'tarc. No, what if they're just misinterpreting the question? Which is
Yeah.
ultimately what that comes down to. The
Yeah. Yeah.
facts are
Yeah.
one thing, the emotions are another, and it's detecting both, which was the cool
Yeah.
thing about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that I can't take credit for that.
Okay.
But it was, yeah, one of those wonderful collaborations. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how it happens. And I think the casting was great. And for whatever reason, I mean, this didn't happen in this instance, but when an executive producer or when a cast member isn't liked at all, killing them
Mm.
is in some ways, the end of their relationship with this. So I don't know what if anything happened, with JR or whatever, but it's a bold move, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't want this character coming back. And sometimes it is it isn't a relationship thing like, oh, this guy's too difficult to work with, which, my sister's first husband was a character on a soap opera in the US called The Bold and the Beautiful for a while. And he was a French guy and he was gorgeous and everything else, but he was so difficult to work with the staff that they made sure that they killed him off, and it was like, yes, the DNA, it's confirmed, this guy is dead, he's not coming
No
back.
way back.
No way back. But then there are characters, I think, that just, you know we use this enough times, and I just don't see it growing anymore, so I think it's just time to say goodbye. And that could have been the case here. I don't know if they know. I mean, if in your research, you found out. I'm just saying that this is in
Yeah.
a general way why characters, or the two reasons why. Either they're hated,
Yeah.
or they don't want to be there. In the case of Jack, I mean, Richard Dean Anderson, he just wanted to, go off and do something else or go back to LA. So there are all these like little behind the scenes reasons for characters I personally don't know the reason why they killed
the
Martouf.
I think the broader also implication is that we are at war with a nefarious enemy, and you need to raise the stakes in your show as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
occasionally you need to kill people like Dr. Frazier and like Martouf to
yeah,
show that, yes, there are stakes. And I think
yeah.
that, based on my research and what I've been told, that's really where that comes from.
Good.
So,
Yeah, I did not know that. And also by the time it went into production, I had moved back to LA. So
yes, very
so
good.
a lot of those things were all changed, back then.
One of the last thing that I want to bring up is kind of a sticking point in terms of story. You've got these potential Za'tarcs running around, and the show never really clarifies this. And I'm curious to know if you have a comment on it. Why don't you just check the people that have the Za'tarc ring to that must be the Za'tarc because he's got a gun. Was there like a point in the story development? It's like, well, does this thing, does this thing appear out of, some build from some of the molecules of his body into a weapon? While just before his mission begins, just before he's activated, where does this device that he's going to use to blow someone away come from? It's little story details like that I, as an audience member, am like, that's a good telltale sign that he might be a Za'tarc.
Yeah, I mean, from my memory, it was again one of those things where, um, and again, this is kind of in the episode
Yeah.
that you're captured and you don't know what's happened to you and how the device is implanted
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. So, um, I think that's one of those things where, uh, you know, Brad would say, "Don't hang a lantern on it."
Yeah,
Um, so one way or another, you suspend disbelief
for
because
sure.
you're unconscious and
Yeah.
somehow it's in there,
Yeah.
and yeah, everybody should probably have. I mean, was there a protocol? I don't recall. Afterwards that everybody's checked for
Right? Check their
when
fingers.
they come back from a mission.
They, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, they were building all sorts of things onto the post medical exam after coming back through a Stargate. But I get your point. At a certain point, are you going to believe the story that we're telling you or not? Oh, this one over here is a bridge too far. Come on, seriously, we're going through Stargates, for crying out loud.
Yeah, yeah,
I've got a few fan questions for you before I let you go.
sure.
Lockwatcher, and I think we kind of touched on this in terms of like connecting to a previous show. Lockwatcher says, when writing an episode, were you provided with certain points that need to be made to connect to future stories not told yet or ones that have just happened? How far ahead from filming were you in writing typical episodes? So when you were dealing with the script, was there anything like, okay, we want to at some point here touch on this or this because this is coming later?
So at the beginning of the season, everybody's in the same room and we're mapping out the season. So we know the arcs.
Mm-hmm.
My role as a senior story editor was to do the episodic ones that were not integral to the plot. It just coincidentally that legacy. I just came up with like an idea again of Daniel Goes Crazy.
Yeah.
And what if we tie that back to Marcello Machine and the guys like that? And so, that's very contained. You never hear about Marcello's inventions again or anything else as far as I know.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
but that was just like, well, Tor wrote this other one, Holiday, aka Imbroglio, and yeah, and then we could leave, those two could be connected, so why not? And they're both Daniel related, so go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the answer to your question is, for me, no, because I was an episodic writer. I was a one-off. As you can see, most of those aren't related to the seasonal arc
Mm-hmm.
of that season. They're just standalone stuff, and that's kind of bread and butter for um, again, when you're thinking about production and studios and things like that, they want people to be able to just look at. They want some episodes that you can come into and just get into it without now having
Yep.
to know what happened before. As long as you know the general gist of the premise of the show, you don't have to know that much about again the plotting of it.
I think
So it
there's a
wasn't a very serialized thing for me. There was
right.
a season arc in every season of where we wanted to be and where we wanted to be the cliffhanger to be. But for me personally, I wasn't planning for that.
Well, I would think that I would want to be in a similar place as you in terms of wanting to write standalone stories because there are a million destinations for this thing and a million things that can happen to us. The only things that are going to happen to us are not just the 10 planets that we've visited so far. That doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. The other thing to consider is that this is the late 90s, early 2000s, and television is switching from kind of more of a standalone episodic or a serialized, like in terms of a soap opera, to what Brad says his agent called a hybrid. So
Mhm.
there's room to
Yeah.
play with both.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. Peace Writer, were the references to the Wizard of Oz throughout SG-1 a thing that Rick started and the writers went with, or were they all ad libs? Do you remember anything about the Wizard of Oz? Comment. Tor's background is really amazing and cool.
Oh, thank you. Um, the Wizard of Oz, I remember, well, yeah, honestly, this was definitely during my time. And I do remember um, all of us just very naturally, I don't know if Rick came up with it, but I remember in the writer's room a lot, we'd be referencing Wizard of Oz a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I mean, maybe just because it's again, it's something that's common for all of us. But, yeah, there would just be lines that again, mushy about being specific here.
Yeah.
I just remember that there was always we're not in Kansas anymore type of, a lot with that was a reference a lot, like, because, and that's very natural. It's like, you go through the gate, you're never in Kansas anymore. You're always going through the Wizard of Oz, and there's always going to be, a road to things. I mean, just every mission is the yellow brick road, right? So, and I think, yeah, I mean, Baum, that whole structure of the Wizard of Oz is just very iconic. It's the man behind the screen, and like, Apophis, like who's really behind Apophis in a way. I mean, it's
Mm,
just Gould. It's just Gould. I mean, that's really the Wizard of Oz, and
I
the
think
the human himself is actually very tame.
that's true. I also think the four characters also reflect Dorothy and her three companions too, very, very well too. Although, according to Amanda, Jack liked to be Dorothy, so there's that. But I think it works.
Yeah.
Uh,
Uh,
Tr- Tracy, do you have a favorite TV series that you like to go back and watch, or a specific novel that you like to reread?
oh boy.
Huh?
Um, Yeah, I mean, in terms of series, I'm trying to think of the thing that I mean, the last one that just made me anxious for um, the next episode always was Game of Thrones,
Yeah.
um, to be honest. And um,
How about that ending?
yeah, well, yeah, exactly. So I don't. I think as a writer, that's the other thing. As a writer, you always go like, I wouldn't have written it that way. And
Right?
it's great that I can say that but I think anybody can say that. I mean, there's fan fiction all the time. I think
That's
Stargate
true.
has plenty of it too. Um, but, I think the same thing with, it's funny. In terms of novels, I'm all over the place.
Oh,
And I
okay.
am, again, because of um, uh my podcast in some ways. I mean,
Yeah.
I love audio books now.
Yeah. Me
Like
too.
that's kind of how I read these
Hmm.
days. And you know, one of the ones that I just definitely re-listen to recently because of it is so magical. Is a novel called The Night Circus. So if anybody's ever it's a magical realism type of thing where you have two apprentices to, it's hard to describe, but
Mm.
one of the older characters is the father who of one of the apprentices, and he's kind of a demigod in his own way. Um, and the other one is a self-taught God. In other words, there are powers in the universe, and he learned them and he can teach them to others.
Mm.
And so these two decide that they're going to bring up these young people, and they're going to have that they continue to have, again, these two magicians continue to have contest between the natural abilities and the taught ones. And so this is their that last story about they create a circus that is sort of like Cirque du Soleil, but a
Wow.
magical Cirque du Soleil. And these two are keep showing off to each other, but they also fall in love. But it is so well written and just magical, and it's all about imagination and writers and artists. So it's hard to describe, but and it's narrated by
Jim Dale.
Jim Dale.
He's magic in and of himself. He's so good.
Yeah, so if you listen to his Harry Potter
Yep.
versions in the US, again, he brings that same kind of great magical voice to that. So I definitely, that's one of those. Stephen King, I'm a big fan of, and one of his that I just again re-listened to was Billy Summers, which is not
Not
one of
done
his
Billy Summers.
typical.
Okay.
So Billy Summers is about a hitman, um, and he's hired for a hit, and of course something goes wrong,
Of course.
um, and and things go on the run. So and he goes on the run, but and he gets redemption.
2021. This is pretty new. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that one. I
Okay.
think in terms of a non-horror, and Stephen King is so again prolific and writes plenty of non-horror stuff. This is one of his thriller ideas, and
Wow.
it's really good. And beyond that, I grew up with um, ironic stuff like Joseph Heller, so Catch 22, and uh, gosh, World According to Garp. I'm blanking on his name.
I'm not familiar.
The World According to Garp? Oh
Oh,
gosh. John
it is
Cider House Rules.
George Roy Hill. No, that's the
No,
director. Um, Written by Steve Tessich, based on the
no,
novel
that's
by
the
John Irving.
John Irving.
Took me a while to
Gosh.
get there, man.
No, terrible. Yeah, it's good that I'm not remembering the actual author who did it. But he's all about irony and comedic irony, and that's yeah. If you listen to my podcast, it's kind of like the Coen Brothers meets Solar. That's what I'm trying to do a lot of times. But it's also we get educational about solar and things like that. But it's yeah, just a fun that's my sense of things. So I hope that people learn something, but my first goal is to entertain them. Um,
It's my last
so
question before that I wanted to cover with you before I let you go is anything new in the arena for Probably True Solar. The description, the link is in the description below, folks. So you can go and check it out. And we're also
yeah,
pulling it up
please
here.
do. Um, well, I mean, I'm trying. So there's an 11 episode story line called The Solar Heist, or How I Got into the Solar Business. So cross your fingers. I'm trying to get attention for it. My old agent is pitching it around. Um,
Okay.
so we'll see if something goes there, but it's a fun one. It has to do with a thief uh, and a solar developer kind of get together and for a heist initially, but really it's about our energy transition. So I think people know that we've got to start going from fossil fuels to clean energy, and it's happening all around us. David, how many solar installations do you think there are in the US right now?
Like Major League?
No, just like in total.
Like on the roof of a house?
On the roof of the house or in a field or anything.
Oh, I would say 8,000.
5 million.
5 million. Okay.
Over 5 million. There
Okay.
is a solar installation, again, throughout the US that's installed every 45 seconds, essentially.
Wow. Man, was I low?
That's the state. Well, and that's just it. And so, my part of what my podcast is about is that solar is invisible
Mm-hmm.
in film and TV today, even though it's all around us and growing every day. It's the number one source of new energy. So if you're building a new power plant these days, chances are there's a 90% chance it's going to be solar powered,
Wow.
with some kind of storage now being added, or wind is something else. But again, solar is the cheapest form of new energy. So we're making this transition. Obviously, oil companies and fossil fuel companies don't like this transition, and that's part of what this solar heist storyline is
Mm.
all about.
Okay.
So it's definitely a lot of twists and turns. And again, if you like the Coen brothers,
Okay.
it's part of that. So yeah, take a listen. They're all at the top of that probablytruesolar.com website. And yeah, please let me know what you think, and please sign up for the newsletter to get future episodes, which I'm working on now.
Absolutely. Sit down, strap yourself in, and give yourself two options:
Yeah,
do nothing or write. Yes, the
that's what you got to do.
description below has the link, so everyone, I recommend checking that out. Tor Valenza, I appreciate you sitting down with me once again, sir, and taking me through some of your Stargate memories. This was a real treat to have you back. It means a lot to have you.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the great questions, and thanks for all the fans again for keeping this alive for so long. I mean, I don't know of a lot of series that have multiple
Right?
podcasts and things like that dedicated to this. I'm sure Star Trek, some of these are around, but that Stargate is in that caliber.
And
Is
inactive, unlike Star Trek and Star Wars. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, oh, fill me in, David. Like, did I saw rumors that another one was going to go forward on
MGM
Amazon?
under it's a shingle under Amazon now is creating something. What it is and when it will be coming out is continually batted about and changing.
Ah,
So I and many others are like, when Gate World announces it, I'll check it out. Until then, it's just a rumor because they can't figure it out right now themselves. So, but something
yeah.
is coming. It's just a question of what and when.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. And again, thanks everybody else for continuing to keep the stories alive, and yeah, and watching this. So, and I appreciate you. Yeah, keep, like you said, keeping these behind the scenes stories alive as well. Like, I mean, it was interesting to see. I mean, again, unfortunately some of those journals were corrupted, but
Yeah, isn't that
the ones that I
sad?
did, yeah, the ones that I did find were interesting to see. Like, I totally forgot about that Urgo reference from before. So I thought that was interesting
That
for
was a
people.
great story to share. And that's why I love doing this. Because every
Yeah,
once in a while you come out with a nugget that's like, oh, that was a thing. And that grew a little bit into that. You know,
yeah,
you never know for sure. So
you
what
never
you'll
know.
find. So
Yeah.
thank you, Tor. I'm going to go ahead and wrap the show up on my end, but I appreciate you stopping by once
Okay.
again.
Thanks again. Yep.
Be well,
Bye.
sir. Bye bye. Tor Valenza, writer and senior story editor for Stargate SG-1. Really appreciate you guys tuning in for this episode. I'm on a bit of a hiatus this month, getting some things taken care of. San Diego Comic-Con is going to be happening next week, and hopefully we're going to be sending you some short clips from the convention of all the little things that are happening at that event. And then on Sunday at the, let me see here, which Sunday is that? At the 28th at 10:30 in the morning, our own panel, the Dial the Gates celebration of the 30th anniversary of the Stargate franchise will be taking place. I'll be posting more details on that very shortly here on our social media. Everyone's like, where's the information? It's available now online, but I will be posting about it here shortly. Next week, we have and I just clicked away from it. A pre-recorded interview with Tori Higginson, Elizabeth Weir in Stargate Atlantis. That's going to be Saturday, July the 27th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. If you like the episode, click subscribe. If you want to see more information about upcoming episodes, you can go to dialthegate.com. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate. My profound appreciation to my moderators, Anthony. He's been really helping out from behind the scenes. Thank you so much, sir. And Tracy, you both made this episode possible. Mariko Moonlight, first live interview. Welcome. Appreciate you tuning in. And that's what we've got for you. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate, and I will see you on the other side.